Raz, good to see you.
Good to
We're
see
back
you.
in the studio.
I see you 2 days in a row.
Yeah,
man.
it's scary.
I'm getting happy.
Yeah.
You're scary. I'm getting happy. We have a wonderful guest today.
Yes, we do. Wendy.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be able to have this opportunity.
Yeah, we're excited. We'll just do a little light introduction. You're currently a property guru, a chief of staff to Hari. I think everybody knows Property Guru if you're in Asia. He said he found his current place on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found my last place on it. I mean, it's everybody knows about it, but maybe not everybody globally. So it's the largest property site in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, so we have properties in 4 different countries, marketplaces in 4 different countries. And I usually say to people outside of Asia, it's like Zillow or Rightmove or REA if they're from Australia.
You've done a bunch of other things, which we're going to kind of cover in another question. And I think we've bantered for a few months getting to this that like, hey, I'm a generalist and that's, we're going to get into that and also kind of talk about chief of staff and things like that because I think it's something that could be better explained to people. So we're going to jump into a bunch of things, but we always start with how'd you get to Singapore? Why are you still here?
Sure. Yeah, love the concept of the Generalist. I was really excited when you started this podcast and been an avid listener since the beginning. So congrats on the journey so far and excited for some of the guests you have coming up as well. I moved to Singapore in 2010 from Australia. I was promoted to run the region I was head of Australia for what was then CBS Interactive, which was when I joined in 1999, CNET Networks, or actually in Australia, it was ZDNet Australia. So, Michael, you would remember.
It was big. CNET was big.
Yeah, yes. CNET was big. ZDNet was big. So, very .com 1.0, San Francisco, early days. So, I joined the Australian business in 1999 in ad tech and ad operations and became GM. So, I was promoted to GM/MD before I was 30. Ran Australia, built Australia, scaled Australia up until 2010 and then moved here to run APAC from 2010 till I restructured myself out in 2014. And I'm still in Singapore because when I moved here, I was pregnant with my second child. So I moved countries double the size of my job and had a kid all at the same time.
Lovely.
As you do. And my eldest, my son, who's almost 17, we're permanent residents, so he is just going through pre-enlistment potentially for national service. But he also is neurodiverse, so we found the wonderful Winstead School when we moved here. It's a fantastic school for kids who can't keep up in the mainstream schooling environment. So that was a big anchor for us for a long time. And then also my husband reinvented himself after we moved up here. He was a trailing spouse. And he was also the primary carer of our son and our daughter. And he's now an auctioneer, MC, and runs a platform for charities to help them with their fundraising activities. So he's the entrepreneur and has his own business, and I earn all the money to fund that and fund all the schooling. So I guess our next break point is post-national service, post-high school for our daughter. But and that's what's kept us here so far.
Or
open-ended at the moment, pending, every few years you check in, right, and see where you are and where you're going. But his business is starting to really thrive again. COVID was a massive halt on the events business, obviously. So... But it's crazy busy this year, so we'll see.
I've seen some of his videos where he's doing the auctioneer. He's quite good at it. He's got the voice for it.
He did white-collar boxing last night, and there's this fantastic photo in the boxing ring. Like, what a stage at Marquee. Incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm hearing, and I want to double-click a bit or maybe tie the threads that you have in your journey.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read what I have in my paper, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And each one of them, when I review them before this interview, before this podcast, I said, hey, each company, it's a different vertical.
Yes.
You need to change yourself. You need to think differently. I'm just going to put some
jobs
names.
As well.
Yeah, different jobs as well. Just going to put the names. You said CBS Interactive. You said, I would say, MigMe, Oracle, Knight Frank, UiPath, and now Property Guru.
That's right.
What's tied everything? How did you...
Yeah. Well, it was media for a long time, right? Or what we called digital media back in those days. And it was really .com 1.0 going into 2.0. And so it was that real kind of early days of the internet, building businesses. None of us really knew what we were doing, right? There was no playbook. It was lead from the front. And that was where I learned how to run a business, run a P&L, hire, grow teams, experiment, iterate. And then kind of from there, it was, where do you go from here? You know, I'd been there for 14 years. And so then it was about going from ad tech to martech. And then, you know, social kind of in between was kind of that, the big me era was really learning about fundraising, learning about different types of media that weren't ad funded. So that was really early days of fractional. And I saw you guys had Paul on, so I'm sure you may have gone there with Paul. But so Oracle was all about MarTech, but then it became about customer experience. And as you know, Oracle's full stack, right? So you can't just stay in one area of a company. And the great thing about Oracle is you can get into the boardroom of any company. And I got to go to every country in Asia. I got to sit in the boardroom of telcos, banks, retail conglomerates, like you name it, and hear everything about how they were transforming from offline to online and how they were thinking about modernizing and digitizing as a result of how the customer behavior was changing. And that really helped me understand the context of what it meant for a business to fully transform and really think about how they connect data and insight across all their customer touch points, but also their employee touch points. So I started getting deeper and going from ad tech to martech to full business transformation. When you look at CX, EX, you know, HCM, ERP, the whole stack. And then I wanted to go to a company and try it. And I was kind of had a friend. She introduced me to her husband. He needed someone to run marketing and digital for APAC. So that's when I went to real estate. Real estate during COVID was an incredible place to be, especially when you think about the future of the office and the future of work, and it was more commercial real estate. So really understanding where and what was happening. And real estate also, I used to say when I first joined, I never knew so many analog people still existed. Like I'd been operating in a digital world for 20 years by then, and it was like literally going back to the last century. And I was astounded, but actually really healthy business, right? Really healthy commercials, but completely different operating styles and ways of working. So really getting into what does it mean to run a business and how you connect to that physical environment was just fascinating to me. And what does place mean when we always talk about people, process, technology, and you forget about the role that place plays. And it's a lot more common now since COVID, because that whole what role does the office play became so much more central to the narrative. But before COVID, it was, you know, during COVID, there was only workplace specialists who really talked about that. So it was really about media, and all through that there was marketers as my customer base, right? So I always sold to marketers up until I went to Knight Frank, and then I became a marketer really briefly. That was uncomfortable for me. I didn't really like being back office. I didn't necessarily like not having that interaction with the customer. And then I went back to tech, and that was when I actually discovered the chief of staff role. So I was talking to an executive coach. I was talking about how much I missed being in control and being able to drive. Because when I was at Oracle, I was an individual contributor, subject matter expert, go-to-market strategist. And she said, why don't you try being a chief of staff? She introduced me to someone, and then automation was such an exciting space to be in, because that was really where the future of work was going, where tech needed, you know, where every company needs to go to drive transformation. Unfortunately, that was short-lived. That was a bit beyond my control, you know, the beginning of the great tech
meltdown,
whatnot. And then I was lucky that I knew my current boss quite well, and I knew who was hiring. I knew I wanted to work for a CEO. I knew I wanted to do a chief of staff job in a HQ. And so I convinced him to hire me. It wasn't quite the profile he was thinking of hiring, but it worked out really well. And as it turns out, property, tech, and media, which is exactly what a property guru is the intersection of the three industries I've worked in the most. So it's a great fit.
Yeah. If I rewind back and I'm trying to understand where is your passion, So your passion is more about let's understand and study diverse verticals and get to know and learn every day.
Yeah.
Or I want to work with more people to be in front of things and be able to scale with them. Like, where is your passion?
It's about learning and getting deeper and deeper into where my understanding is where enterprise needs to go, more from the brand side. When I work on the tech side, it's about helping the sellers be better at what they're doing, like whether that's go to market, whether that's the BD side of it, the lead calls, all that kind of stuff. So I would say it's more about unpacking like my understanding of where the world's going, and I kind of do it through learning. And it's funny, there's this kind of buzz circulating the last 24 hours. The CEO of Zomato advertised for a chief of staff and said, you do it for free for a year. And
I thought it was you pay for it, isn't it? It says like you're gonna.
Well, you pay. Well, in lieu of getting paid, they would donate to charity.
Oh, okay.
And in some ways, I've done that, right? Like I've chosen jobs based on what I get to learn and who I get to interact with and what I get exposed to, as opposed to what I get paid, which is very much that career jungle gym rather than ladder. And, in some ways, going from being in control, having hundreds of people reporting to me, running a P&L, to then being an individual contributor and supporting other people to do that is the antithesis of what most people do. But I'm kind of backfilling that decade where I was completely flying blind and just getting more depth. I think you guys talk about it a lot when you talk about being a generalist. Yeah. Most people grow out of a function and then become the boss. I leapfrogged to being the boss. So in some ways, I'm backfilling that knowledge.
Interesting.
And I think what I've noticed is kind of the work you're doing, apart from these roles in kind of female community and empowerment stuff. There's the walks you guys do.
The mentor walks,
mentor walks, which are, I think, interesting. But I know this is something you care deeply about. And I'm wondering, how do you think we're doing in Southeast Asia or APAC when it comes to female founders, actually, and even female executives, and the kind of work around just making that better is?
Yeah. I don't spend a lot of time with female founders, to be honest. I actually spend a lot less time in the entrepreneur community, full stop, than I used to. I spend a lot of time building my own female networking group and kind of adventure guides, as I would call them, for about a decade, more than a decade. And that was fabulous to build confidence and understanding and shared understanding in a safe space where we could really, there were no dumb questions, and you could really understand that everyone was going through the same things you were. But it wasn't great from a getting everyone further faster, because the people who have all the power are often men. And so my learning was, you need to invest time in building those relationships with men, because having them with women will help you build confidence, but it won't help you get anywhere. So I've noticed women who I know who've worked for the right logos and been in those environments where it's what sponsorship means is really taught to the men that they work with. I think they've done really well out of that, and I think they've had a really, really good opportunities that I've seen, and they've been able to capitalize on that. But I think beyond that, there's still, the real estate industry is still dominated by, senior male executives, even the tech industry, despite there's a few women who have done really great, but it's still, even what we were just talking about before we came in here this morning, the same guys hire the same guys, and the merry-go-round continues.
Is it a global thing, or do you think it's worse here?
I think it's a global thing. Yeah. Do you know what I do love about what I see in Asia, though? Compared to where we were when I arrived in 2010, there's a lot more people from Asia in senior executive roles. And so we have at least lifted the local community and the education and the ability. And I see some really great women, actually, even in tech, who are from Asia in quite senior roles and here in Asia, which I love. And I love to see that. Which is an improvement, right? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But Uma, who started Lean In and Lean In Women in Tech, and she's now running Elevate Asia. I worked with her last year on Lean In Girls, because my passion now is about how you help the next generation. And my daughter, I have a 14-year-old. So how do I help her?
In the thing of making this better in Asia, is there things that you would do to try to improve it or fix it? Because I think like Raz and I talk about this, is like, I have 2 daughters, he has 3. And then we see the same thing you see. It's generally the men. And I was talking to, I think Alan Soon, maybe in the media space, Splice Media, and we're trying to have him on. And he wrote in his latest column about, he's calling the manosphere in media, and kind of how that clearly helped Trump get reelected for sure. And then he thinks about it for his son is like in some sense we see the women population getting more empowered and things getting better, but from what just happened there and what you see in social media is part of it's getting worse from this man thing, if that's why he nicknamed it the manosphere. And I'm wondering, like, how do you feel about that? And is there anything people can do about it as having kids and stuff?
Yeah, the whole boys club around the whole Trump, the deliberate boys club. And I don't know, you probably listened to All In.
Not anymore, actually. I stopped.
It makes me want to vomit. I deliberately listened to it the other day just to,
Remind
they
yourself.
say you have to listen to the other side. But the rhetoric and the propaganda, right? It's mind blowing. Yeah, the way the boys club helped and is helping and is jockeying to help themselves as a result it's a really big blow, I think, to women who felt confident the world was changing. How blatant it has happened at such a important seat at the table is shockingly sad.
Yeah, it feels like a big reset in the wrong way.
It really does. And I think everyone was reeling as a result, as you watch it unfold, and, man after man is benefiting from these relationships. Here in Asia, I think there's a lot of different things, but I think we all start with, and what I've learned from Lean In Girls and what I've learned from watching my husband and my daughter is, she benefits so much from the time she gets with him, and she gets so much more time with him than she gets with me. And I think that she has a role model in seeing a strong mother, but she also has a role model in seeing a different kind of parental environment. And then her father is, very outgoing, so that pushes her. And then when I saw through the Lean In Girls program and things that Uma's created, that opportunity to start there in school, to show girls how they can act differently to build confidence. I always say, drama is really key for girls. Like, I think now is the time when they're in tweens and teens to build that confidence, to use their voice and to expect to have an equal voice. So I'm hopeful that because of the awareness of the parents, male or female, things can improve. I work for an incredibly emotionally intelligent work with an incredibly emotionally intelligent group of men who are very consciously aware of creating equal opportunities or over investing on helping women be more successful. I've never worked in an environment like that before. And so I'm hopeful that as a result of learning from these big MNCs that do invest in unconscious bias training and but making it real, not just lip service, that we'll find more men and men with daughters who are really invested in making the change we all want to see. So, I see glimpses of it. I see women coming through who I think will change it. And I think we have to be conscious of how we help where daughters do it now.
On the same sense, because you moved few different jobs.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you struggle in some places as a female, as a lady, as a young lady, and then moving forward. What are the 2-3 things that you would say to this lady? Maybe she's 30 years old. She's starting her journey. What are the things that make you shine in this tough world?
I think it is that investing in sponsorship relationships, right? And really investing in connecting, because it's so easy to invest in who you're comfortable with as opposed to who you should cultivate that understanding of how they can help you, but also help them help you. a good friend of mine, Joanna Bloor in the US, she often talks about teaching people how to talk about you when you're not in the room. And that's a really important skill.
That's good.
Right? And so helping people help you kind of thing is what everyone needs to be more invested in. You know, a 2-minute elevator pitch, how you help people talk about you so that when they're in the right rooms, they can represent you well. That's a really important skill to invest in from the beginning. Building relationships beyond your comfort zone, so not just, you know, defaulting to who's fun to hang out with at lunchtime, but really being conscious. And it's interesting, you see, like if you work with ex-Googlers or something, right, they will always message you after a meeting and say, can you give me any feedback? Tell me how I did in that meeting. And it's almost always men. So learning from people like that have been taught all the skills in the companies and then applying it in your own environment. And I think the other one is, I always see 9 times out of 10 people who reach out to me for connection, men. They have no barrier to asking for help. Women always do. So, you know, don't get over that barrier and cultivate relationships and networks that will help you do more than learn, but actually actively be able to move further in your career and life.
I like that you emphasize sponsorship. I had this conversation with one of my ex-employees, and I told her after I left, I said, you need to find a sponsor, not a mentor, not a coacher. I said, what's the difference? And you just explain what's the difference to make a person speak about you when you're not there. This is a type of sponsorship. It's gonna take you forward, and I think it can be very helpful in different positions. You don't have to be a VP or executive. You can be the practitioner. Early days, just find your sponsor, and it's working. I can say it myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really simple but really effective. And they used to talk about it in that Obama campaign, the original Obama campaign. The other thing they talked about was how you reinforce someone else's point of view, right? And so that's a really important skill to develop as well. And just say, I really like the way you said that, and you know, let's tease that out. So that's another good thing that I think men can help women and younger talent with. When you're in the room and you hear something great, you know, oh, Michael, that was a really great idea. Let's build on that and or reframe what you said so that the rest of the room hears it but attributes it to you. That's another really good skill that people should consciously develop.
Yeah, and I think as leaders, we probably sometimes forget that little micro encouragement is huge for that person in the moment, but we kind of act like maybe it's not, or that it's too small of a thing, but it's a big thing if you're them, because you feel some sort of justification and probably increase your confidence just a little bit more for the next go around, right? And I think that's something I learned from some of the training and coaching, was like, if you can get good at spotting that and pull it out, it makes their day, even if you don't quite see it in that moment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. As a chief of staff, we've talked to other people that the generalist thing kind of equals chief of staff or vice versa. And obviously you have some strong opinions about this. So what's your view on just generalism in careers for yourself, and how do you correlate that to your chief of staff roles?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to a coach about this recently. Chief of staff can be anything from EA plus to CEO minus. It's a very, very, very elastic title, and the responsibilities in the title vary massively depending on the size of the company, the stage of the company, and the stakeholder that you work for or work with. What I see here in Asia is actually a lot of chief of staff are just, you know, the founder doesn't have time to do a bunch of stuff, or they're so busy fundraising, they're like, hire a chief of staff because they don't really want to invest in a head of anything really. You know, they don't necessarily have the funding yet or the time, so they hire everybody to do anything and everything. And I often talk to this talent. There's a chief of staff society I'm a part of here, and there's about 75 of us. That was started by D'Angelo from Think and Grow. Oh, yeah. And he's been cultivating this community for, probably about 2 years now. And so I meet a lot of the talent, and a lot of them are quite young and that early stage career, mid-stage. And the scope and scale of the roles that they're doing, I'm like, you're not a chief of staff. You're almost everything but. And, you know, I feel for them, you know, and that, again, going back to that opportunity to learn from, you know, it's missing the point of what a chief of staff is, in my opinion. If you're really invested in the opportunity to create leverage for yourself as an executive and for your executive team, and to enable you to be in more places as a CEO and have that kind of 1 + 1 = 3, to me, that's, you know, I always say when I was a COO, I had clear accountability for a certain set of functions. If you think of Sheryl Sandberg and Zuckerberg, they're kind of the two most famous, right? She was commercial and he was engineering and product. And so clear delineation of who was running which bits of the company, and together they ran the business. Whereas a chief of staff, you don't have control of anything. Well, your job is to help your stakeholder be successful in their job, and then to help the information flow and be the conduit across whatever the scale and scope of their job is. So if you're the CEO chief of staff, it's across all of the business. If you're the CTO chief of staff, it'll be across the tech org. If you're the CMO chief of staff, it'll be in the marketing org. So in my experience, there's a lot of misinterpretation of that and a lot of underappreciation for the leverage you should get by introducing a chief of staff into your business. The generalist comes from, for me, if I think of when I was a VP in my earlier career and I was in charge of everything but had no specific expertise, it was more about, your ability to be able to dip into a marketing problem or a product problem or an engineering problem or a finance problem and be able to synthesize that to unblock bottlenecks and drive the business forward. So obviously I can draw from that as a chief of staff as I help the CEO and the leadership team drive our business forward. I always thought being a generalist was not necessarily a good thing. I always wondered if not having a
because
sales...
someone tells you it's bad, or because you get vibes from people? Because this is something that until I, and it kind of what started, until I had read Range, that book, it was the first time that something just went, wow, this is okay, actually.
It's a good thing.
But it was not something that, like, when you're young that you would talk to your parents about. And at school, it's frowned upon, right? In the normal...
And recruiters don't get it.
Yeah, they don't like it because they're like, right? Can you please tell me what you focus on? Like, so I guess it just naturally has a negative vibe until maybe you discover... For me, it was the book. I think for other people, it's a particular role or maybe some. But what made you feel good about it? When did that happen?
You know, I think the chief of staff role that was one area where it felt right, because you do need to be able to do a little bit of everything and know a little bit about everything to be successful. I think then secondly, when I spoke to a coach recently and we were talking about other titles like CEO and COO, you can't be a CEO or a COO unless you have generalist tendencies, right? And expertise. Like, you cannot run a business unless you understand all areas of a business. So you don't have to be able to do them all, but you have to be able to oversee them all. So I think my imposter syndrome came from not having grown up in a function and having an area of expertise to come out of, which, you know, is different for you. Like, you did have, to some extent, I guess, product. Sort of, but then you had so much variety within that because of the different companies as well. So I think all of us have to find a way to leverage our strengths and over-index on them and show whoever we're talking to what our potential is. And that's also important, right? People need to invest in potential rather than what's been done before, because that's irrelevant, especially in these times.
Yeah, it's my huge problem with recruiting and how people look at roles is they try to decipher from this paper versus what do you think I'm capable of? Let's have that discussion. But
it's our job to teach them that.
Yeah, it's just not easy, right? But
it's not easy. Yeah, you've got to get, and that's why most of us don't get jobs through recruiters or CVs, right? It's introductions.
And do you think from a CEO perspective then, because you as chief of staff, you've been to the CEO, right? Or the MDs, are generally CEOs generalists then in your mind, or the ones that are successful are? Is it?
I think different CEOs are different, right? And I think like any chief of staff role, like I said, there's very elastic in the chief of staff. Like some chief of staff will be more revenue ops, some will be strategy, some will be comms, some might be a combo. It really depends on the stakeholder and the stage of the company. Like the Atlassian chief of staff, she came out of internal comms, and then she now has built a CEO office for both the co-CEOs there. So whereas you may find other chief of staff who are very heavily from RevOps or strategy, like ex-McKinsey or whatever. CEOs will be similar, right? Like if you look at heads of tech companies, they're either engineers, if they're founder CEOs, or they're head of sales, right? Like, and even if I think of Oracle back in the day when I was there, Mark Hurd was co-CEO with Safra. Safra was the accounting side of the business, and Mark was the sales side of the business, right? And then Larry, who was the founder, was off doing the fun stuff, right? Building the product and
still is, I think.
Yeah. Oh well, sailing yachts, whatever that is. But yeah, so it's different, I think, depending on the persona and the personality of the company and the personality of the CEO. And I think also founder CEOs versus operating CEOs. And I think of one of the companies I worked for before that had a founder CEO. Then they brought in an external CEO, and that external CEO is gone, and now they're back to the founder CEO, because sometimes if they love the product so much, they don't necessarily want to let go.
I had a chance in my career to work with chief of staff, a few different domains, and personally I appreciate it a lot. I know what it means, I know how tough it is, and I'm thinking about other people that doesn't have these examples, how it's look like, and they want to recruit a chief of staff.
Yeah.
When is the right time to do that?
I was talking to someone about this recently. I was introduced to a guy in KL who's trying to build this really exciting business in sports entertainment, legal. It's really super cool. And he was trying to debate between whether he needed a COO or a chief of staff, and his coach had recommended him to me. I don't think there's a right answer, because it will come back to the stage, what other execs you have around you, and what your capability you think you're missing as the stakeholder. And a chief of staff doesn't have to be just for the CEO, right? Like some companies have them at every level of the executive team. Some companies have them way, way broadly across the company. So I think if you're at the stage where, as a executive, that you feel like you need help to be able to scale yourself in a way that you feel having a conduit that can help you, translate, get the team operating more functionally, get the business, the rhythm of the business going with you, so that you can be freed up to focus on specific things, whether that be fundraising or, innovation, or kind of expanding the business and focusing on corporate strategy. Depending on where you are in that cycle, those might be reasons why you want to invest in it. When you worked with one, did you hire one, or were you just in a company that had one?
I was in a company that I didn't hire one, but I had lots of engagements with chief of staff. The way I approach it, for me, it was the sponsor of the chief of staff is the stakeholder. Yeah. So I need to have a very close relationship with. If I want to push stuff, or I want to have a kind of a winning, a good force multiplier project, I should work with the chief of staff, because he or she know to navigate. They have more approach to other departments or other places or people that I wasn't familiar with or didn't have the relationship with. Yep. And this was kind of the pivoting point and it's worked, both ways. Make sense?
About in your business now? Have you ever considered hiring one?
Again, the question is the same as I ask you. It's when is the right time? Because in my head, based on my experience, is it the chief of staff is not a PA? Yeah. It's not.
Yes. Correct.
And you just mentioned that it's not a COO. COO have different capabilities. So how you find the relevant time, place, and I'm very structured. I like roles and responsibilities. So it's who's doing what and how it can leverage. So I think it still doesn't sit in my mind when I know if the team is big enough, I would take this opportunity to find one.
I guess it's also, though, as you scale, if you need that elasticity of ambiguity, to your point around roles and responsibilities, and you're not ready necessarily to fully hire a function, it can be that stopgap and then like go, okay, we're at a scale now where we need to hire that function, and so they would help you hire that function.
Yeah, and like the Atlassian one, because I think I've read about that person. They come from inside sometimes too, right? And I look at this the same way. Like when I'm advising startups, you always get this, or even founding. Like, do I need a CTO? And I'm like, well, actually ask yourself, do you really need one? And why so senior? And why now? And it's expensive. Why don't you have your head of engineering start doing that? And maybe, so I look at the chief of staff thing, to your point, like if you have a need for some help and there is ambiguity around these needs, that person is like a stopgap to, I'm not sure yet, but if you help me, and I think to the question we could actually multiply my talents, maybe that's all I need right now. And then I don't have to hire the atypical COO or the atypical CTO. And then that's when my mind goes back to, that's when I think a generalist is a good fit for a chief of staff, because it's like, look, we don't know what we need a year from now, but today we need this.
Yeah.
I see it as like a way to help in a situation where you don't want to have to go lock down permanence.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that's where it's most commonly adopted here in Asia. And then I think the idea is, come on, do this for a year or so, and then pick which role you want. So whether your role becomes strategy, operations, sales. One guy I know ended up being head of sales, right? So depending on as this company scales, they can kind of slip into a function using that experience and knowledge of the whole business. So that seems to be a very common playbook here on how people are using the role.
Which isn't a bad strategy, I don't think. Like,
it's not a bad strategy as long as you're compensating them well, and as long as you do build that pathway that they get to,
because you can't just maybe leave it at that unless you get big enough to where you need it. You might have to have the outlet for, I do need you to become X or Y.
Well, you need to give them a pathway to something. And that's where a lot of chief of staff are struggling, because if they're a generalist, they can't decide which pathway. And it's also, it's hard to give up that visibility to everything.
It's very powerful, right?
Yeah. It can be really powerful.
You were referring before.
Yeah. And then you get that kind of, you get pushed back into a silo and you only get to see a lot less. So people do struggle with that for sure.
Tell us more about the ExecMultiplier.
Yeah, so I mean, we've already talked a lot about it, right, in one way or another. But it's a term. Force multiplier is one you hear more often, and I kind of tweaked it to ExecMultiplier. There's a famous book by a lady named Liz Wiseman called Multipliers, where she talks about multiplier versus diminisher in an organization and what it means to be a multiplier and to really help everyone help themselves and amplify the power of the people around you and ask the right questions to help people be better. So to me, that's what an exec multiplier is, and overlay that with kind of executive coaching. You know, I've been studying, like you, trying to build that muscle around being able to ask more open questions, help people understand what it is that they can do better. And, you know, when you bring that into an executive environment, not as the executive coach, but you use those coaching techniques to help people help themselves, it can really lift the whole organization. So to me, that's an exec multiplier. And hopefully, maybe eventually one day, if I did build my own business, that's what I could help executives and help themselves be better at, rather than being diminishers, right? Which is just soul crushing.
Do you want to build your own business?
It's always in the back of my mind, but one of my colleagues always tells me, a vision without a plan is just a dream. And so I was going to build a chief of staff community and association. That was actually the track I was on when I first started this current role. But then I found Delo's Society, and then I started researching. There's so many chief of staff associations in North America and Europe. And actually, I realize what I want to do is invest in the executive more than, because the chief of staff community is skews a lot younger, shall I say, and a lot more emerging executive. I want to invest more in the executive end than the chief of staff end. So pivoted my vision slightly, but I guess my job right now is to help my husband's business.
There you go. That works.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about Property Guru and what you're doing. Not so much Property Guru itself, but as you're kind of working on the transformation there, how is AI, and look, we took a while to get there, so we're doing better.
We did well.
Yeah. How is AI like a part of this transformation when you think about its use possibilities and just making a difference with it, both internally and externally?
Yeah, so my role kind of expanded officially earlier this year to this VP transformation title, which is really just as someone who has the purview over cross-functional dysfunction and cross-functional efficiency opportunities. My role is really to focus on operational excellence and employee effectiveness, and a key tool to help with that is obviously both automation and AI. And for me, it's trying to understand, can we leapfrog the automation part by leveraging AI and agents and whatnot? Like, is there a way to get there faster? Some people are counseling me that I have to slow down a bit and understand, you still have to do all the process re-engineering work no matter what. But so we're working through that. We're testing. We have loads of different AI activities going on. So the ProdTech org kind of run their own investments in GitHub for engineers, productivity, but then a whole bunch of other LLMs and experiments for the product and for just innovation. I'm more focused on the business user and the kind of how we leverage it for the everyday non-technical stuff. And so we have about 200 people experimenting with Microsoft 365 Copilot. So when I look at how different parts of the business who operate almost exclusively in 365, right? In that PowerPoint, Word, Teams meetings, SharePoint kind of environment, how can they leverage AI? And then thinking about it more specifically for like copy and creativity, customer service, all the classic kind of verticals that we know can get significant leverage by upskilling and taking advantage of it. But it's hard. To be honest, it's really hard to retrain yourself to use Microsoft, right? Like we've been using Microsoft for some of us multiple decades. And so like slowing down, it's like when you hire an intern, right? Like when you hire an intern, you have to slow down to train them what you need them to do. And then they'll become more effective. But if you...
Hopefully.
It may be, right? And it doesn't help that the product itself is... 6 months ago it was terrible. It's a bit better now, and it will be way better in another 6 months. But you have to retrain everyone that just because it worked that way a month ago, actually it works better now. And just because it works differently here to there, like there's so much, it's so clunky, right? And it shouldn't be that clunky.
Yeah.
But ultimately at the core is, how do you think about prompting versus searching? How do you think about connecting behavior across applications and enabling technology to help you help yourself? And so all of that kind of change management is really what me and my team are spending a lot of time on, is just finding different ways to find the use cases that resonate and expose them to as many people as possible, and then get more momentum from the excitement and the potential. But I'm not sure yet I could say it's a game changer in terms of, will it help us, with, I was talking to someone about this today, like, will we be able to hire less headcount as a result? Not yet.
Yeah.
But, maybe in the future, but.
Yeah, I think it's an evolving
space.
Theory about all, but that you know something's going to happen, but trying to put your finger on exactly in my own business how it might affect something is tough to forecast, I think.
But even when I worked in automation, right, like we talked a lot about a number of hours saved, and you know, every single application, you know this, like you've both sold software in the past, right? Like every single value engineering piece of work that you do says this software helps you save this amount of hours, which equates to this amount of dollars, which equates to this percentage increase in productivity. The reality is always a mix of all of the above, and it definitely helps you improve your business, but it's not exponential enough yet.
Yeah.
And so really helping the business to continue to refine that is an art.
I think if you take in 10 years back, the adoption of the cloud took time, and now it's very robust.
Yeah.
AWS doesn't look the same way it was looked 2015.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Or even how you use cloud.
Or how to use cloud. AI and all these type of things are kind of came to us 2 years ago. It's still a genesis. We don't know exactly how to use it. Sometimes we think more vertical.
Yeah.
It's had to assist us with everything.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I start to recognize, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're testing more vertical than horizontal, and you specifically with some things, especially with AI, you need to train the model for a specific job. Maybe then you're going to start to have results, but we're still testing. So
yeah. I think it's both, to be honest. Yeah. And, you know, and going back again to the automation, like just looking at robotic process automation when I was working in that a few years ago, it's just being able to map across everywhere and having people change mindset, right? What's an automation first mindset? What's an AI first mindset? What's a prompting first mindset? As opposed to, it's easier to just do it the way I've always done it.
It's a people problem.
Yeah.
As much as we don't like to think that it is.
It often is, right?
It is.
And I spend as much time saying, you know, we used to say in one of the software companies I used to work in that most of our customers were level 1 to level 2 customers. Very few customers got to level 4 on the maturity model, right? And so if I can just get all of our team to use our core applications of record better, we'll probably get just as much productivity gain. And those applications have got a ton of AI in them anyway. So, you know, there's degrees of improvement you can achieve.
I'm having fun. I think we can go over, you know, for a few hours now. A few questions, but we have to pause.
Yes.
And we're going to do our routine. And if I will take you back to your 20 years old, what you would tell her?
I think we kind of covered that already, but I would really tell her to be more strategic about the relationships she builds and be more proactive about teaching people how to represent her in rooms she's not in.
Got it. Do you teach that to your daughter?
Not as explicitly as I should. Good point.
No, we ask that a lot because you could turn around and ask me too, because there's all this advice and I sit there and go, do I actually say this to my kids? And then I sit there and go, probably not enough, right?
Yeah,
like
probably not in a structured way.
Yeah. The one I keep doing, my littlest one, is like at Halloween sometimes she'll pick something that's not feminine or something, and someone else will blurt out like, you can't do that. And I'm like, no, you can. Do you want to be Batman? You be Batman. It doesn't, like, do not let any stereotype start with like a 5-year-old. Like, it's okay. Like, you know, and I'm thinking like, oh, I got to do more of that
for sure
as she keeps going, because I realize that's where it starts. It's these little, back to that micro thing where they're suddenly ingrained to,
and then they still can choose. We have the same ocean at home. Pinky doesn't mean it's for girls. You can have blue. But if they choose in the end of the day pink, it's fine.
Okay.
It's okay. You can have all the pink shirts that you want, but it doesn't have to be for girls.
Yeah, and it's okay for boys to like Taylor Swift.
And they keep asking me, do you want to do your nails? Like, not today.
Mine do my nails. You're busy. I saw you went, which I really found that super cool. You were on that mommy-daughter trip. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys went somewhere, and it was at Phuket, and listened to Taylor Swift songs hum by the pool. So I kind of put that in the things you do for your health and wellness and your family. But how do you kind of tackle being busy and all these things from health and wellness to kind of keep yourself sane and healthy and on the right path?
I don't do it enough is the honest truth. I think we should all own up to. That's probably something I'd tell my 20-year-old self, to be balanced. But when I do, it's definitely meditation, podcasts, coaching is kind of that mental wellness. And then the physical is Pilates, aquarobics. And yeah, time with my children is another really important one.
Yeah. So that's a good time.
Yeah.
You just mentioned podcasts.
Yeah.
And we always ask if you can recommend on a good podcast.
We know it's not the all-in.
It's not. Or a good book or a TV show that you recently watched.
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of TV, although we started watching Glee last night from the beginning.
Oh, wow.
But the podcasts I love... School. I love a lot of, I imagine, the same ones you guys listen to, so I won't go there, like Grit and Pivot and a bunch of other ones like that. But there's this one, 60 Songs That Explain the 90s.
I've heard of this one. And
yeah, this guy started it during COVID, and he went to like 100 and something for the 90s, and he's just started the 2000s. And he spends like an hour and a half, and he doesn't actually get to the song until... I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the podcast, because he starts talking about this, the band members and the threads to other band members and all of this. So that's pretty cool. I dip in and out of so many. Podcasts is probably my main. I watch very little TV. And the other thing we do religiously is the New York Times puzzles, so Wordle, the mini crossword, the connections, and Sudoku. So my daughter and I and my husband, we pretty much do those every day and compete against each other.
Got it.
Yeah.
Just a nugget, a few months back, someone breached to New York Times, they got all the database and including the word algorithm.
Oh, really?
So it was funny, but the other parts wasn't funny.
People are mad about it. I remember when they announced it, like you could go back in time and pick from the days that you missed or something, and it was like a huge thing. And I'm like, what, do people feel awkward if they miss it or something?
Yeah, I'm not religious about that.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's just fun to do. It's a simple, short, fun.
I know it very well.
Yeah.
I did it a few times.
And it's fun to do with your kids.
Yeah.
I think, to see who can get it,
We're on the Uno thing at home because my 6-year-old has decided that's the most fun thing. So it's like, can we play? I'm like, okay, Uno again. I've had to get different versions of it just to try to switch it up a little bit.
It's funny when they get into Monopoly and then you discover digital Monopoly, and it's like a game changer because you don't have to deal all those, the money in the houses and all that stuff.
We're still with the Monopoly, the normal one, the usual one.
Oh, you're still old school?
Yeah, old school, still old school.
Younger kids.
Yeah. But I would say, just on books, the other one, aside from Range, is Multipliers.
Okay, that one I don't know.
Is a really good one, so by Liz Wiseman.
And the opposite of multiplier again is the diminishers. That's a good term. There's plenty of those in the corporate world.
She actually used to work at Oracle as well.
Oh, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, ironically.
Awesome. Well, we're done. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It was great. Great to be here at last.
See you around town.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.